You're tuned in to Shake, Rattle, and Goal, the official podcast of your Springfield Thunderbirds.
Osmanski, a one-timer deflected side of the goal. Alexandrov scores! Hosted
by Matt Baker and Steve Forney. A show that's everything Springfield hockey, with interviews including players, coaches, and staff.
The Springfield Indians repeat as the Calder Cup champions.
Listen to this podcast on all major streaming platforms and wherever you download podcasts.
In his first year at the helm, Kevin McDonald and Drew Bannister have the teamers in the Calder Cup Finals.
Watch the podcast on the official Shake, Rattle, and Goal YouTube page at SRG Podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Matt Baker and Steve Forney. And this episode number 24 of the Shake, Rattle, and Goal podcast is proudly brought to you by our friends at White Lion Brewing, their new location in Amherst, and of course in Tower Square in downtown Springfield, your go-to pregame spot for Thunderbirds games, and also by our friends at YOLO Healthcare Consulting, bridging the gap for those traversing the healthcare landscape. Alongside Matt Baker, I am Steve Forney, and it's a pleasure right off the top to be welcomed by a guest who's been on before. You can catch his stuff on the NHL.com, the AHL.com. He's on Sirius XM NHL Radio and Rocket Sports, and he is the go-to guy for everything involving AHL hockey. Patrick Williams, thank you so much for the time today, my friend. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be back.
So, Patrick, it's kind of funny when we last time talked, you said, watch out for Hershey. They're going to have a hot start, and they're on like a record-setting pace here. So kudos, you nailed that one. Anything else sort of across the league as we rehash the first half of the season that maybe surprised you, whether good or bad, or is not something you expected?
Yeah, I mean, Cleveland definitely surprised me, to be honest. They're a group with a nice group of players, but there wasn't necessarily guys that you would say, okay, they're going to really have breakout years like a Jet Greaves, for example, and net, but they've had a really good year. I mean, they had a little bit of a slide lately, falling down to second place in the North, but solid, all things considered. Milwaukee, I mean, they're going for win number 15 tonight. They were a team that was kind of up and down early in the season and then just absolutely took off. And just blown past the competition. They're 15 points up already on the second place. And then the Pacific Division just kind of it's such a weird division too with the games in hand. Like you have still, even at this point here in February, you have an 8-game difference in games in hand between teams in that division. So it's really hard to get any sort of feel for kind of how that whole standings mess is going to shake out, but it's 11-point gap from second place down to 8th place, right? And the top 7 making that division. And in that division, it's really critical to get that first place spot because you can finish second, as Coachella Valley did last year. They finished second in the entire league, and they had to go in that best of 3 first round. I call it a play-in series, and they almost got eliminated there in the first round, despite finishing second overall in the league during the regular season. So there's a lot of incentive there to really get that first place spot in that division. So every division is a little bit different, just with the way the playoff format is. Just number of teams that make it, what they have to do when they do make it. Once they get in the playoffs, some teams get buys, some teams don't. It's kind of a real, jumble there right now.
Patrick, here in Springfield, it seems like this year we're playing teams like Hershey, Providence, and Hartford well.
Yeah.
Might not always come out with a W, but we're playing them well. And then we head down to Bridgeport, right? And it just seems like there's sloppy play and having a little bit of a hard time there. Kind of a two-part question here. One, is that common around the league? We don't see a lot of games like we see all the Springfield games. So we can't compare, how does Bridgeport play against Wilkes-Barre? So is that common? And if it isn't, can you help us make it make sense for us as Springfield fans? Because it's driving us crazy.
Well, it is fairly common. I mean, two things usually come into play. I mean, there can be a lot of factors, but the two big factors are One is inconsistency in this league is just across the board. I mean, that drives coaches crazy with young players, right? They're just notoriously inconsistent. They're first, second year guys. They're trying to find their way. One night they look great, and the next night they look like they've never played the game before. Mm-hmm. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is just, I don't know that this has been a huge issue for Springfield, any more than anybody else, but just the roster turnover, just from one night to the next in this league. I mean, you start to get things gelling a little bit, right? You get your lines in place, all your systems in place, and then you get 2 or 3 call-ups, boom, right at one shot. So that can go the other way, right? Like you can lose players, or another team can gain 2 or 3 players from their NHL club. So it's so different from the NHL in that sense. For the NHL, other than injuries, you're pretty much your lineup is what it is. Right. From start to finish, this year, or any year in the AHL, right? Like if you compare your opening night lineup to your lineup the last game of the regular season, more times than not, it's going to be, probably at least half different, if not 2/3. So that's the thing. And I think, like with Bridgeport, for example, when you're playing them, I think you go into that building, there's just not much energy. I know this, you hear this with a lot of opposing players, right? And like Bridgeport can kind of lull you to sleep a little bit. Right. And they can kind of, sneak up on you that way. Right. And even when they come into your building, like they don't play a real run and gun type game. So this is a case, I think Springfield, in particular, really plays up or down to their competition. Right. Like they looked fantastic the other night against Hershey in some ways. I mean, and then, there have been those other nights where they have to do those those crazy third period comebacks against a Bridgeport. Just to pull out a point, or maybe, win in overtime or shootout. But Springfield is like, I would say this year, especially, is like a really sort of very typical AHL team, like kind of like classic definition of an AHL team, right? Like great one night and the next night just look completely disorganized. Y'all also had a, coaching change, early in the season, right? So like you kind of have things in place, and then you have upheaval with the NHL club. You have to do like Chuck comes in there to take over. He's trying to find his way. He's trying to get his things in place, right? So it's just a lot of moving parts for a club like Springfield.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, how much the effect that losing Drew Bannister has in that, and what is maybe the process. Obviously, like you said, Kachuk trying to find his way, but at the same time, you still have a locker room full of veterans and even the young guys. It's not like they've never played hockey before. Like they know how to play. So how much really goes into, from a player's perspective of, you lose your coach and now it's like, what am I going to, so what do I do? Or how much of it is just like, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like, I know the passes to make. I know the plays to make. I know how to break out a puck regardless of who the coach is.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like I also look at a team like St. Louis. They've been kind of up and down this year, right? Like right now they're in a wild card spot, but let's be honest, a bad week or two could drop them right out. And I have always wondered, and it's one of those things you can't really prove or disprove, but like how much of a factor that is when the NHL team's kind of going through their own issues. And how much that gets the attention of players down in the AHL, right? Like if you're seeing that, hey, there might be some upheaval there in the lineup up top. This guy got called up instead of me. You start to have those issues. And I'm not speaking like specifically with Springfield here, but like that is an issue that you see a lot in the AHL too, where like the NHL club's problems eventually become your problems, or vice versa. If things are pretty smooth with the NHL club, then more often than not that will translate down to the American League. But Springfield or St. Louis has kind of had their ups and downs this year, and Springfield has tended to follow right along with that.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have the NHL trade deadline is approaching. Is there do AHL locker rooms feel that? Are there different emotions that go on in an AHL locker room knowing trade deadline's approaching? I could be the guy on the move. What is an AHL locker room feeling like right now?
Especially when your team's, your parent club's in a wild card race like the Blues are.
Yeah. So that's kind of a classic example, right? Like where, where's Springfield gonna or where's St. Louis gonna go in the next couple of weeks? Like, are they a buyer? Are they a seller? Or are they gonna just stand pat? Who knows, right? But it could go a few different ways. I found that like when you have, let's say you have a real blue chip prospect there, but maybe there's not a spot right away for him in the NHL lineup. So like he's certainly somebody that's going to be trade bait. That can be very distracting for that player, right? Mm-hmm. It's a little different, I think, for more of your standard AHL players, because like you never hear rumors, like really, like they're not out there in the media, right? That like, hey, some third line guy in the AHL might be on the block, right? So a lot of times these moves, come completely out of left field for these players, right? Like they're completely blindsided and they don't expect it. And all of a sudden, they get a phone call like, hey, you've been traded to, like I'll give you an example. Like last year, Chase Prisky was in Rochester for, traded to San Diego, late in the season, right? Like, like didn't expect it, and went to a team, went from a team that was, eventually going to go to the Eastern Conference Final and went to a team that was like completely playing off the strain in the AHL. So that, that kind of thing is like just, it's a little bit different, right? There's just not that scrutiny. I mean, I know players, they follow the rumors and the speculation as much as anybody. I mean, they have more incentive really than anybody, right? Like, it affects them way more than it would affect, any of us. But a lot of them, like, I found like they end up like coming, to the media or something like, hey, have you heard anything? Like,
Interesting.
Ask, it's like, could you make a few phone calls and see if my name's been mentioned, good or bad? Sometimes like they want to be on the move, right? Like sometimes, let's say you're 24 years old, you've maybe hit the wall with your team and, you want to be, move somewhere else. That can be great. It also can be like, hey, I don't want to be moved. I've settled in here. My family's happy here. I don't want to be traded, the other side, 3 time zones away. So like it really can go either way depending on the player.
That's fascinating. We're talking with Patrick Williams. You can catch his work covering the AHL on the AHL.com, NHL.com, SiriusXM, NHL Radio as well. And a great follow on Twitter. I don't know about you, Patrick. It's sort of how we came across each other was Twitter. I love Twitter. I don't understand like for when it comes to breaking news, whether it's snow totals or trades, or it just seems like that's where all the information is. Is that sort of your main, as a media person, is that sort of your main social media? I mean, I don't have TikTok. I don't know, Matt. I don't think you're not ticking and talking.
I don't know. I don't have any other than Facebook. That's the extent of my social media.
I gotta
get up with the times.
Yeah. So like, how much do you, just sort of a random question, how much of an asset do you find Twitter in particular as a social media outlet compared to other ones?
I think Twitter is as good or as bad as you make it, right? Like if you follow good people, right, or good accounts, you'll have a great experience. If you follow bad accounts, it's gonna fall. It's just not gonna be a very pleasant experience, right? Like if you engage with every troll on on the internet, right? Like, yeah, you're gonna have probably an unpleasant time, or maybe you'll love it. I don't know. It depends on the personality, but yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Like I find it pretty useful. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of like some of the clutter on there now, like the teams. You see sometimes like, with all the kind of like, memes and all that kind of stuff. I was more of a fan of like the earlier days of Twitter where it was like more like, here's your breaking news. Almost like kind of a what do you call it? Ticker tape type news feed,
They used to put sports scores at the top.
Yeah.
Remember those days? Like that was great.
Or, there's the other side of it where like, then you get sometimes like the accounts that like tweet every single detail of a game, right? Like I follow pretty much every team out there, in hockey, and like, you'll be getting some random like team, like, okay, there's a tripping penalty, like, so like there's probably like at least for me, there's probably like a happy medium there, but for the most part, I'm with you. Yeah. Like I think it's really useful. I mean, it's funny, like pretty much everybody in hockey is on it in some fashion or another. I mean, it's funny, like how many like coaches and GMs have like the burner accounts, right? like, so, like I'll see them. I'm like, wait a second, I know who that. I know who that is. Really because funny. Like, how people with the handle, like they have like some sort of identifying thing that kind of gives them away, right? Like, and So it's funny. Like, I mean, hockey is just one big like gossip fest, right? Like, like everyone's looking for that little rumor, that little like, nugget to chew on, right? So it's kind of perfect for that. So yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think Twitter it's fun, right? And like it's certainly changed everything really about, I think, the hockey world, just in terms of like, I think back to like, it wasn't that long ago, really, in the grand scheme of things, like 2010-ish, where you didn't really have that. And like, it's like, what did we do before then, right? Like,
right, right.
Like it's changed so much, right? Like, and a lot of times you end up getting the news really before like it's even, officially put out there. And, like for me, like I wish I could put more out there, just, like, but a lot of times like you're kind of sworn to secrecy on things, but yeah, there's just a lot of back and forth. And, it's interesting too. Like you'll see these like, you'll see like, current former players like sitting there like just jawing back and forth with fans, or not even jawing back and forth. Sometimes just like, sometimes it's a nice cordial discussion too. And, like you kind of a little bit of everything on Twitter, and like I said, I think it's as good or as bad as you make it.
Hey, Bobby Robbins sharing excerpts from his book is fascinating. I'll read those tweets all day, but no, you're right. It's a reflection of the internet as a whole. 90% of it is hot garbage. 8% of it is useful, informational, funny, artistic. You just have to find that 8%, because if you're in that 92%, it's going to ruin you.
Yeah.
That's always sort of the thing I use.
I'm not good at math, so that's why I stay away from it. I'd find the 92%, I'm sure. Patrick, when we talked earlier, right before the season started, we failed to ask you about the Chicago Wolves and sort of their breakup with Carolina. Do you have thoughts on that? Is that good for the AHL? Is that something that the AHL should sort of ban? I mean, I can't imagine that's good for the team or the AHL, because now basically that roster is full of, not a void of talent, but full of guys who are not tracking towards, I'm trying to gain a roster spot in the NHL. These are all guys who are, this is the end of my road, so to speak, right? So is that a good thing for the league, competitive advantage wise? Is that something that the AHL should step in to sort of negate when possible?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because like, if this had happened maybe 10 years ago when there was more turnover with affiliations, I think it would have been something that you could have worked out. But the problem now is, if you look around the league and like, all right, so Chicago and Carolina are having trouble, right? All right, well, okay, where should both sides go instead, right? Well, like you go look up and down the lineup, like the list of teams, right? Like that big shuffle, like really around 2015, right, where everybody really pushed to get their affiliate geographically nearby. For the most part, I mean, there's a few exceptions, but really solidified a lot of things around the league, right? Like, I mean, so that, there aren't too many affiliations now where you're like, okay, well, maybe, there could be a swap, right? Like there, let's say like you start to like, I mean, it's funny, like you sit there and like just you gossip just like anybody else, and like you're like, well, let's say Chicago and St. Louis went together for one example. Well, they already worked together, so, and it didn't go well, so that's not going to happen, right? So like, well, maybe Springfield and Carolina, but like Carolina is looking for something else, and like Springfield and St. Louis are happy, so like there's not a fit there. It's almost like a dating game, right? Like, or musical chairs where you're trying to find this fit, and there's just not much movement now. So many teams have brought their, like you have 4 or 5 teams now where they have the affiliate right in the same market, or then you have another big glut of teams where the affiliate's within an hour or two. So they're not looking to break things up, right? So long term, I don't think it's good. I found it's been an interesting experiment just to like see how does this work in the modern day AHL. Like there was not any example of this for almost 30 years. You have to go back to 94 with Worcester to see a truly independent club. And that was obviously a much different AHL. So now you're looking at, okay, how how's it doing? And like, and then Chicago got off to that horrible start. And you're like, okay, well, this isn't going great. They've been able to kind of pick themselves up a little bit now. It's been interesting seeing like Carolina sent 4 or 5 players into Chicago now because it didn't work well for Carolina either. They were finding that they were having to send players down to the ECHL. They sent a few up to you guys in Springfield.
Yeah. We're happy to have.
We're happy for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Which it can certainly be beneficial, but I mean, in an ideal world, you want all your prospects under one roof, playing one system. For your coaches, right? Like getting top priority, right? Like, it's not ideal really long term for Carolina or Chicago. So while it might be interesting for people on the outside like me to just see how this goes, they do long term have to somehow find a way to make this work, whether or not maybe there's another affiliation shuffle, where then somebody partners up with Carolina, somebody else partners up with Chicago, but one way or another, and I know this is a real top priority for the league, really top priority for the NHL too, because right now you have an NHL club that doesn't have its own affiliate.
Right.
So one way or another, they're going to have to get this solved. It's going to be a tough fix, though.
It's still strange to me seeing the Charlotte Checkers come into town wearing Carolina colors in the same market and not be their affiliate. That's still I have a hard time wrapping my head around that, but it's strange.
And they found a pretty good fit now with Florida. They're pretty happy with each other. It works well for Florida. Florida bounced around everywhere. I mean,
they were in Springfield.
Before that, right? And then they were, every corner of the AHL pretty much at one point or another, going back 25 plus years. And, so they found a nice fit. It's easy, logistically, tons of flights back and forth. So they're pretty happy, but, it is strange here. It's seeing Carolina colors, right there in Charlotte, drives away from the Hurricanes. But it's the AHL, right? Like you just when you think things are quiet, there's always another, little, plot twist that shakes things up.
Interesting. Matt, do you want to fire off that last question about coverage?
Yeah. So, Patrick, I'm just curious. I think over the last few years, right, we've seen huge growth in fan bases around the AHL and just the AHL in general, I think, as a league. Do you catch wind if there's any discussions about making improvements to AHL TV's production, whether it be, just sort of improving their app a little bit? That's something that's kind of come across our social media feed a little bit. Some fans, I can't get in till the puck actually drops. And then by the time, we can get into the game, we find out that there's an issue, but the team doesn't know there's an issue until the puck drops. So you end up missing half a period or something like that, or even just sort of a little bit more consistency from building to building with camera angles or anything like that. Do you know if the league is in any discussions about sort of making some improvements there?
I don't know anything specifically. I do know that, they're looking at, definitely just in general, trying to get the streaming and the whole presentation as good as possible. That also kind of takes into account, like technology improves and changes and so there's a lot of moving parts with that. I'm not really an expert by any stretch
sure.
On the tech side of things, but I think it's come a long way. Let's remember how it used to be. It's gotten a lot better, and I think you'll see it continue to get better. And I think they are definitely they like anything, right? Like you want to give the best possible product. You can, whether you're a hockey league with a streaming app or you're a restaurant, so with a meal, like whatever, like you want your fans are your customers, essentially, and you want your customers to be as happy as possible.
Good stuff.
Awesome.
Well, Patrick Williams from the AHL.com, NHL.com, Sirius XM NHL Radio. We really appreciate you taking the time on the SRG podcast. Great to catch up with you again. Best of luck to you, and who knows, maybe come playoff time we'll reach out again and get back in touch with you if that's cool with you.
Absolutely, anytime, guys. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
All right, there goes Patrick Williams. An absolute pleasure to have him with us. A lot of insight there and information there. Again, always just a wealth of knowledge at this hockey level. And as always, the SRG podcast proudly brought to you by our friends at White Lion Brewing, their new location in Amherst on North Pleasant Street, and right in downtown Springfield at Tower Square, 1500 Main Street, the place to go prior to Springfield Thunderbirds games. Parking in downtown Springfield's a bit tricky these days. Make sure you park in the Tower Square garage and swing into White Lion. Show them your Thunderbirds ticket, and they'll validate it for you. And while you're there, grab some Boomer Nachos, Seuss Mac and Cheese, some Hall of Fame wings, along with any of the 20-plus beers they have. And don't forget, you can find your favorite White Lion beers in your local liquor store cooler. White Lion Brewing, now in Amherst and in downtown Springfield, a proud local sponsor of the SRG podcast. Make sure you tell them the fellas from SRG sent you, and by our friends at YOLO Healthcare Consulting. They offer education, training, tutoring, coaching, and mentoring for healthcare professionals and students. Founding owners Yolanda Mero and Lola Rios are doctorate-prepared nurses with over 40 years combined bedside, academic, and leadership nursing experience. They also offer assistance to individuals navigating the healthcare system for long-term care and home care planning needs. Founded right here in Western Mass, YOLO Healthcare Consulting are the ones to contact to help you bridge the gap if you're traversing the healthcare landscape. You can reach out to them at yolo.healthcareconsulting@gmail.com, or you can give them a call at 413-627-0609. and tell them that the guys from SRG sent you. Not bad at all there, Matt.
There we go. And hey, if you're on Twitter, follow Patrick Williams. Let him be your, what'd you call it, 8%? Is there the
8%, yeah. 90% of Twitter's garbage. 8% of it's fantastic. So you got to find your 8%. But no, we appreciate the time there. And the nice thing here is it being the sort of vacation week that we have another fantastic interview coming up for you right now, and it is your captain, Matthew Pekka. Let's toss it to that interview. And next up, it is an absolute pleasure to have on the Shake, Rattle, and Goal podcast the captain of your Springfield Thunderbirds, Matthew Pekka. Captain, thanks for taking the time with us this evening. We appreciate it.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Now, as we talk here, it is Thursday night. What big weekend of games coming up here in Charlotte? What's the plan when you guys head out?
Head out tomorrow morning. Get there nice and early, which is nice. It's always nice to get rid of the jet lag and maybe go see if we can get some top golf in us and enjoy the weather. Get the legs moving before two important games.
I told you there was golf involved, Matt. I told you
it
can't go down there and not play golf, dude.
It has to be. Yeah, of course. Awesome, Matthew. Thank you for coming on with us. We appreciate it. First year as captain for the team, right? Not first year as on the leadership team, but were there any sort of adjustments or any sort of putting your stamp on the locker room this year as first year wearing the C?
Yeah, definitely a little bit, and nothing glaring. I think past leadership groups, Tommy Cross especially, just left such a good lasting culture. The work ethic and the professionalism in our locker room is great. So there hasn't been a whole lot of needing to address that kind of stuff. It's just about, day-to-day things. Mm-hmm. For me personally, not much change. My game didn't change. I just seemed like I talked to the refs a little bit more than usual. Other than that, I just try and approach my job the same way as I always have.
Well, it's interesting because we had Casey Terreri on, and his sort of approach was, it's a working relationship with the players. And he said that communication is so important. We're trying to do our job. They're trying to do our job. We want everybody to sort of do it together, and how important the communication was with him and the players.
Yeah, for sure. You don't want to make enemies of anybody when you're doing your job. There's no sense in yelling at each other or anything like that. So you basically just got to talk to them like regular humans. I know sometimes it could be frustrating out there, but it's just important to keep your cool and just have open conversations with those guys. They're working for us. They're not against you. So,
yeah. Early in the season, or not really early in the season, but the call up with Drew Bannister. How does that affect the locker room? I know it was nice having Coach Tkachuk already part of the coaching staff, but does that change anything in the locker room or your role as captain through a coaching change early in the season? Yeah,
things definitely change. And ultimately, it was all positive when you have your coach get promoted. It's nothing but good stuff. We were very happy for him, and in turn, then our assistant coach gets to be a head coach. Everybody kind of like moves up the ladder. Everybody is expected to do more, and that trickles down to the players. Now we only have 2 coaches in the locker room as opposed to 3. You'd normally have 3. So there have been things that not necessarily get pushed aside, but they kind of get put onto the players. We need to be more professional. We need to be ready. We have to have more of a sense of urgency when it comes to special teams because our coaches don't have enough manpower to deal with power play, PK, and everything on a day-to-day basis. So that's really just been the only adjustment, that there's been a little bit more responsibility on us as a group, as players, to make sure we're ready to go every night, because they're 2 guys are doing the job of 3.
Yeah, I've noticed there's been a couple games. I think it's been I've seen Chris Thorburn on the bench. I've seen Glenn Wesley on the bench. Is that just, they're sort of, I guess, development coaches, I guess might be their label. Is that just sort of as an assistance to just a third set of eyes, basically, throughout the course of a game?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Any chance that we can get them on the bench, the more the merrier. They're very knowledgeable guys. They've been around the league a long time, and every time they're on the bench, they give us a little bit of a sense of urgency. They're watching the game, and they're just as vocal as anybody, trying to get us doing the right things. So it's always great to have those guys in the building.
Yeah, Glenn Wesley still looks like he's 30. It's impressive.
Yeah,
I don't know how he does it.
He could probably still play too.
Yeah, I bet he could.
He looks like he could.
Well, one thing that's I talk about changes and guys going up, down. In the beginning of the year, it was you, Gaudette, Walker, really solidifying that first line, and there's been a lot of shuffling on your wing between Walker and Verana, and how has that, not just as a captain, but as sort of the centerman, how does that sort of change affect you from a day-to-day, game-to-game, maybe week-to-week basis?
Yeah, it definitely it changes a little bit of the vibe of the line, but we have, whether it's Walks, Vrana, we got Boldy with us now. Like these are all good players. These are all, be it first rounders, or Vrana played forever in the NHL. He's been a skill guy, been successful in every league. So I feel like that's just kind of what happens in the American League. I've never really been a part of a line that's stuck together all season. There's a lot of moving parts. You have to deal with injuries up top. So, and typically if a line is doing well, you might lose a guy to a call-up. So this is all, it's nothing new to us. We've all been through it. And early on in the season, it's nice to get time with other guys, get some chemistry going, because come playoff time, there will be injuries. There's going to be some adversity that we have to deal with, and everyone's going to have to step up into these roles. So when it happens in the season, you don't really bat an eye to it. You just kind of come to the rink and see who you got.
Awesome. So if nothing else, right, this team, you guys are battle tested. You're resilient. There's no fear of a 3-goal deficit, a 1-goal deficit with 10 seconds left, right? I think that was your goal against Bridgeport. Take us into the locker room, right? Second intermission, heading into that third period. What's the tone? Is anything said? Is it clearly you guys are confident in your skill? You have the mental toughness, but take us into the locker room a little bit during that second period intermission.
Yeah, it's funny because we went through a stretch of games where I think we were down early, and then down late, and ended up coming back. We had, I want to say, on 3 or 4 different occasions, it was like a 2-3 goal lead that we overcame second half of the game or third period. And like, I remember us talking about the fact that we hadn't come into the locker room in between periods with anything positive to say. It had always been at the end of the game. And that kind of kept on coming up going into the third period, being like, we're still not happy with our game, but our thirds have been our best. We know how we need to play. And there was never any doubt, but there was definitely a sense of pride that we can't keep giving up these goals and these leads, because our luck will run out. Like, it's not sustainable, but it's like things happen throughout the season. You learn about learn about your team and about your players. And that's definitely something that we are comfortable in being down, because we know that, we turn it on at the end of the games. And lately it's just been about having better starts.
Interesting. We're talking with Matthew Pekka, the captain of your, I almost said Quinnipiac Bobcats. We'll get to that. Captain of your Springfield Thunderbirds. One of the things that Matt and I have talked about on the show is, it seems like you guys play Hershey really well. You play Charlotte really well. You're always back and forth with Hartford and Providence.
Mm-hmm.
And yet those pesky Bridgeport Sound Tigers,
Mm-hmm.
is there something like about just playing different teams, or maybe just different styles that work well or work not so well, not even just this season, but just in general in hockey, where you see a team and you're like, this team does something that we can exploit. This team does something that we have a really hard time with.
Yeah, for sure. I wish I could put my finger on it, but at the end of the day, it just comes up to matchups. It just comes up to style of plays. And, they're maybe a bit naively, we're not as ready as we should be playing against a Bridgeport as opposed to a Hershey. That's just, that's in any sport, in any league. When you're playing the best teams are going to get teams' best efforts. So, we have a young team, and sometimes maybe the little bit of sloppiness creeps in when we play teams lower in the standings. But, at this time of the year, those are the kind of things that you weed out, and everybody starts to come together and understand, the dog days that we're in and how important these points are. So, yeah, we're ready for our next test against Bridgie, because they've kind of had our number. And like you said, we just got to play the way we do against those other teams, and we'll be fine.
Absolutely. That's awesome. All right. So let's get into a little bit of Quinnipiac here. I'm from Hamden, Connecticut. I grew up there. My dad was a firefighter over at Mount Carmel.
Class of 08. Go Bobcats.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Look, they've really kind of, from when you were there, I remember my dad was a season ticket holder, and like kind of your, I don't know what you'd want to call it, but like your group, the group of guys, like your core kind of started Quinnipiac onto their run now. I know you're probably into your own career, but do you have a chance to kind of keep an eye on Quinnipiac, how they're doing? Are you paying attention to their run this year, their championship last year? Are you kind of like, that was supposed to be mine? Like, how's that work?
A little FOMO when you see that happen?
It's tough to say. There's none of that when they won. Like, we're as alums, we're nothing but proud, nothing but happy for the guys. I mean, you hear it over and over how, like, people try to give us credit, and it's kind of weird when they say, your group paved the way, and yeah, as important as the foundation of, building a culture was, like, these guys still had I think it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, they had goals against average under 1. Goalies were incredible. They're guys who scoring 60, 65 points a year. Like, they're deserving of everything that they accomplished, and it's them and theirs. But it's hard to explain. It's just so cool, especially a school like Quinnipiac, have it being the first. And I would say kind of a long time coming. That coaching staff and Brajesh Patel, everybody, the strength and conditioning crew, everybody there they needed it. They deserved it. They've been working incredibly hard. So yeah, just nothing but being happy and proud.
Good to see Rand Pecknold get one too. I think you talk about starting it from the ground up. That was the guy, Yeah. For sure. Any favorite hangout spots down there in Hamden? Going to enchiladas or what?
Yeah, we loved it. We loved it there. That burrito that they served.
Yes,
that's incredible. I can't remember what it was called, but a lot of it's changed. Yeah. I went back for a Tuesday game 2 years ago that I was able to make. And, I poked my head around town and lots changed, but campus is still the same.
Ray and Mike's is still there. As long as Ray and
Yes,
Mike's
Ray and Mike's is still there.
That's all that
Their
matters.
breakfast sandwiches. That was it. That was the spot.
There's this Chinese takeout place called Blessings to Go, which the boys loved.
That's funny.
That's still there.
Do you guys ever do any like training? I mean, I used to hike up Sleeping Giant all the time just to keep my rear end in shape, just for the sake of being in shape. I always wondered if you guys ever would just be hiking up and down that thing. I mean, it was a beautiful spot, but a great place to just like get a workout too.
Only if we were in trouble. If something had happened, be it, you missed an assignment in workout or in the classroom or something like that, sometimes we would do 6 a.m. workouts as some form of punishment. And it was, wasn't always anything bad that happened, but it was just if the standards weren't met or something, if somebody's skipping class too many times, 6 a.m. workouts, and sometimes we'd run the Giant as well.
The Giant. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Love that. We're talking with oh my goodness. We're talking with Springfield Thunderbirds captain Matthew Pekka. I get this impression from the fans that you're sort of more of a quieter guy. You just sort of give the impression of being a quieter guy. But then, when I see you guys after the game, you're trying to prank Laffy in his interview. Are you sort of like the prankster guy? Have you ever pulled off a couple of really good ones, or you just like to keep it light within the locker room?
Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm not a prankster by any means. I'm not loud. I don't feel like I'm all that quiet. I'm just kind of right in the sweet spot, right in the middle. I go about my business. I focus on leading by example more so than being vocal, and especially for the young guys, just doing your best to let them know when it's time to have fun, when it's time to be serious. It's important to kind of let go sometimes and enjoy wins. So that's all that was.
Sounds like Tommy Cross.
There you go.
They're from the best.
So this version of the Thunderbirds roster, right? It is young, a lot of young talent. How does the makeup of this roster between, the ups and the downs and now some injuries, and then, a guy like Vrana with the NHL experience and the NHL skill, and how does that help young guys' development, like Bolduc and Dean and Loof, guys who, rookies, learning how to be a pro and mixing in with pros of all different levels of their career? Is that hard? Like, are you finding yourself do you have to manage it a bit as the captain, or do you kind of let, you do your thing, and Mac, when he was here, he does his thing, Vrana does his thing, like you guys all help develop these younger guys in your own ways?
Yeah, you said it. You do it in your own way. So if I were to pick me personally, like I have a routine. I like to show up at a certain time, and I like to get into habits where I'm doing the same thing every single day. And as much as I can, just again, lead by example. If guys see me doing this kind of stuff, showing up at 8 o'clock, working out, getting my rehab in, you hope that kind of rubs off on them in the future if they're struggling with injuries, or so be it. But at the end of the day, you don't necessarily want to impose your way of doing things on young guys. It doesn't work the same for everybody. So you just want to encourage them to be as professional as possible. Don't let injuries or workouts or rehab slide by because you just don't feel like doing it. I guess the biggest message to send to the young guys is that this is an everyday thing. You don't get to take days off if you're, if you had a night the night before practice. So it's just about doing the exact same thing every day, regardless of how you're feeling or how things are going on at home. When you go to the rink, you go to the rink to work. So, and everybody does their own thing differently. So just hopefully that they kind of follow your lead and figure out what works for them.
Nice.
Interesting.
Baker, you got one more question before I ask my nerdy ones?
Well, yeah, let me ask you this. This was something that Steve and I kind of were talking about. First year as captain, are you looking at other captains to see how they might handle different situations? An example that's kind of close to us here in Massachusetts, right, would be looking at the Boston Bruins with Brad Marchand, first year captain, and kind of early in the season having to deal with Lucic and his situation. Are you,
Right.
again, nothing like that, luckily, is happening here in Springfield, but like, are you paying attention to other leaders across the NHL and the AHL to kind of see how they handle these situations and kind of take pointers from them as well, kind of from the outside looking in?
Yeah, 100%. And it's tough. It's tough because we don't do a lot of media necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
I've had guys tell me that. I can't remember who I was talking to, but they're telling me a story about how an NHL captain mentioned. He's like, it's so much more than I expected. It's way more media. It's way more time with coaches, and everything's just a little bit more amplified at that level. In the American League, not so much. Like I said, I've dealt with the refs a little bit more, dealt with our coaches and our players a little bit more, but my personality, my way of doing things doesn't change. So for me, what I focus on when I'm looking at them is more so their play. Best advice, like Tommy gave me some advice. He said, when in doubt, just focus on your play. So if you're not sure what to say or how to handle situations, just do the talking on the ice, be the leader on the ice, try and be the best player on the ice. And, there are a lot of guys in the league that you watch do everything that there is, fighting, hitting, blocking shots, face, like you name it, all their intangibles are good. So for me coming into this year, I just wanted to be as steady as I could when it comes to details on the ice. That way, when there is something to be said, I can hold guys accountable because I'm doing my stuff right.
Sure.
So for me, when I look up to guys, when I watch guys, captains especially playing, it's focusing more so on their play and less what they're doing off the ice and stuff.
Well, it's interesting because Kevin Johnson, the in-game host, it was we didn't do those, the interview the first star on the ice. We didn't do that for a long time, but part of the reason why I had nothing to do with it, but why the organization started was because that's what happens when you get to the NHL. And it was sort of an NHL prep, for you guys, and I think that Nate Costa tries to do as much of that as he can for you guys,
Absolutely. It's trickled down from our leadership group, our management, into our media staff. It's something that I feel like every American League team and organization kind of craves, is more of a NHL feel around the locker room. And I think we've done a good job with that, especially the media team.
That's awesome.
Especially that podcast, right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
We're talking with Matthew Pekka, and I want to just get nerdy here for a little bit because I saw that graphic that you love playing guitar, and I'm just a super music nerd. And your favorite guitarist to play is John Mayer. So are we talking like acoustic, Body is a Wonderland John Mayer? Are we talking like bluesy, gravity, electric guitar? What do you, Dead and Company John Mayer? What are you playing?
So I kind of fell in love with the style of play when I was learning acoustic, and it was more kind of his country stuff, weirdly enough, or I wouldn't call it country, but more of his like folky acoustic stuff.
That was like when Katy Perry broke up with him, and then he went in the desert and started writing a country album. I think
kind of around that. That's around the time where I started playing guitar. So
gotcha.
That suited my ear, and I enjoy finger picking and stuff like that. So I tried getting into a little bit of electric guitar and more bluesy stuff, but my skill set isn't there yet. So
that's my problem. I can't play any of the music that I like. But I really like. It's too complicated. Are you a big concert guy? Do you go to? I mean, are you obviously like music? Do you get to a lot of what's the best concert or a concert you saw recently that you enjoyed?
I caught Morgan Wallen. My wife and I caught Morgan Wallen this summer, which was a good time. My favorite concerts have all been on the smaller side. I've caught a bunch. Like Lumineers was a great show. I've caught the Bare Naked Ladies a few times. Just little pop-up stuff here and there. Those are my favorite kinds of concerts, rather than the big arena ones.
Hey, some of the best concerts I ever seen were at Toads. I mean, there was a while in college where my favorite bands were coming through Toads, and your feet stick to the floor.
Yeah.
And but that the club shows are sometimes the best shows.
Yeah, those are fun.
All right, man. I'm done with my music stuff. I don't know. You got anything else?
I love it.
You got anything else for the captain?
I'm good. I'm good. We got a little Quinnipiac in there. I would be, my family would get upset with me if they didn't just say they thoroughly enjoyed watching you play at Quinnipiac. And the few times I've had my parents come up to watch some Thunderbirds with us, my dad's always rocking his Bobcats QU jersey. And so,
thank you. I appreciate it.
I guess I got one more question for you, because we do this like fan feature segment, and all the fans that we've had on all have pictures with you. And, you know, I know that, again, talk about getting ready for the NHL and stuff, but I know the fan base here is really into it, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how important is that for you guys as players when you're walking in and there's fans wanting to take pictures, and sometimes when you're leaving, fans want to take pictures, and when you go out for warm-ups, there's signs all over and everybody wants sticks and pucks. You know, that certainly doesn't happen at Bridgeport. They got 1,200 people in the building, but
they got more T-Bird fans in the building sometimes.
Yeah, darn right they do. Is that what is the player perspective of that when you see that kind of stuff?
Nothing but positive. I mean, I've been very lucky. I've been very blessed. I feel like everywhere I've played, there's been a fan base. I can't imagine playing in an empty rink. Like, it just doesn't. You know, COVID year was a COVID year. It is what it is. And, you know, if it ever happens, I'm sure I'll be fine. But I can't imagine not playing in front of fans. I feel like it's part of the game. It's part of, you know, what makes playing hockey fun, making people happy, signing kids shirts, all that kind of stuff. I personally love it. I love the fact that every time we do a player appearance out in public, it's always packed. It's just feels good to be supported and watched in especially a smaller city like Springfield. It definitely exceeded my expectations 2 years ago when I first got here.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was announcing in an empty TD Garden during COVID, and I'm like, why am I here? There's nobody here. What am I doing here? But anyway, thank you so much for coming on. We wish you the best of luck coming up against Hartford, who's playing a ridiculous stretch here. By the time they get to Springfield, they're going to be in pretty tough shape. So good luck with that. Good luck the rest of the season. Hopefully we can catch up again soon, and we really appreciate your time.
Of course, anytime.
All right, there goes the captain of your Springfield Thunderbirds, Matthew Pekka. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to him and get his time. And as always, that interview and the whole show brought to you by our friends at White Lion Brewing in Tower Square in downtown Springfield, and their new location in Amherst, and now also by our friends at YOLO Healthcare Consulting, bridging the gap for those traversing the healthcare landscape. Any takeaways real quick from that interview?
Look, this was a great episode. 2 very good interviews. You know, talking to the captain, you can tell he leads through example. He's professional, you know, and it doesn't surprise me to hear how he goes about his business, talking to people in and out of this organization. That's what the Thunderbirds do. They're all professionals. They go about their business and, you know, yield positive results. You know, in playing sports, we know this. We're not winning every game, but we will win our fair share here in Springfield as we continue to have the professionals doing their job. And Matthew Pekka is exactly just that. So I think a great guy to have in the locker room, a good leader for the young guys on the team, and positive outlook, I think, for the future, both near and far.
Yeah, I mean, just even keeled. I mean, you know, when the bullets are flying and you're playing terrible, you're playing great, you're in a losing streak, you're in a winning streak, and you look down the bench and he's just the same.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's got to just be so calming for young guys and even older guys who maybe don't want to get sent down, and now they're down here and they're annoyed and they're frustrated and blah, 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 blah. And then you meet you talk to the captain, and you're like, all right, like I got to roll and I need to fill it, you know?
Yeah.
I'm doing it for this guy.
And it's a great point you bring up, like that even keel. I think that's what prevents it's a different beast here in the AHL because there is always so much roster turnover to begin with. But I think having a leadership group that does stay even keel prevents you from having, you know, horrid type years. You're going to have your ups and downs. You're going to have a losing streak, but to stay even keel, let the, you know, come back down to center when it gets really high. You bring it back up when things are getting low. You know, and I love to hear that as a fan. That gives me confidence that, you know, the organization is kind of here to stay, and I'm glad it's under Pekka's leadership.
Hey, good advice for life.
There you
Don't
go.
get too high, don't get too low.
That's it. Just
So as we look forward to the weekend, just the game Friday night against Hartford, and again we brought it up at last week, but 6 games in 8 days for Hartford.
Yeah.
You were on game, and you get them game number 6. So, I think this is a big opportunity for them to steal a couple points against the team that's ahead of them in the standings, and we don't even going to know what the Wolfpacks are going to look like by the time that game rolls around. How do you manage rosters? How do you manage goalies? I think that's going to be a big thing for Hartford to figure out over the stretch. So
absolutely,
I think it's a huge opportunity for them to pounce.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think, I think the big thing at this point is for the Thunderbirds to continue to play their hockey, and, playing 6 games in 8 days. I think these are points that are there. Like, you can see them up on a low branch of a tree. They're just there to be picked. And so, I think it's just an opportunity where you got to go take it. And, it's not the end of the world if you get a point or even if you lose in regulation, but the points are there to be had. And we're playing in the Thunderdome. So I expect a loud crowd, bringing the boys back after a weekend in Charlotte. And, hopefully they can take care of business.
Well, as always, we appreciate everybody tuning in, listening, liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting. The more we hear from you guys, the better we feel about it. It makes us feel like we're not talking to ourselves. And again, we appreciate everybody that reaches out and contacts us. And I got to tell you, I think we're both having a really good time doing this. So we're just going to keep this train rolling.
We're here to stay. Let's go, T-Birds. Do you want to ask me your question?
How do you do your face-offs?
How do I do my face-offs? I get really low to the ice, and I hold my stick as close to the blade as I can. So you get more strength and more leverage on your blade.
Yeah.
You tell them you do face-offs for your floor hockey.
I do. I'm a center for my floor hockey.
Nice. Do you take a lot of face-offs in floor hockey?
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Nice. I haven't played floor hockey in so long. I miss those days.